Welcome to ATI 4448. In this session, this is the second part of Chapter 2. We will continue with the project initiation process. And in this session, we are going to address the scope, the definition of the scope, developing the project charter document, identify and document the high-level risk assumptions and constraints using historical data and expert judgment. So those are the three activities that we will address in this session. Let's start with the first one. The project scope. The project scope is the high-level description of the features and functions that characterize the product, service, or result that the project is meant to deliver, which includes project goals and objectives. Usually also we address the success criteria that will be associated, why this project will be successful, or why did we choose this project. But since in the first stage we did the feasibility study and we did the selection, then that will be addressed in that activity or that stage, where we know now why did we select this project, or why this project will be successful because of the benefits or the cost or the outcome that's related to the organization strategies. The fourth activity is the development of the project charter. The project charter authorizes formally a project to begin. So the project manager will be selected, assigned, or identified at project initiation, and the project charter gives the authority to that project manager to start doing his job. And it links the project to the work and to the strategic objectives of the organization, which is the go or no-go decision. Someone external to the team and of higher organizational rank issues this authorization and approves that this project is a go, and assign the proper project manager to that project. The elements that will be documented in the project charter should include the business need that the project will meet, and it should include a description of the product resulting from the project. Again, it should be clear what kind of product or service that will be delivered at the end of the project, which will be a good or clear document to be approved by everybody. The customer, all stakeholders will know exactly what will be delivered at the end of the project. So not to expect less or not to expect more. It should be issued by a manager external to the project who can satisfy the needs of the project. It will also include a section describing the key objectives and goals of the project. These objectives and goals are often the key assumptions, constraints, and target performance metrics for the initiatives. Actually, we are looking at any assumptions or constraints affecting the project schedule, budget, or quality that are mentioned or described. They should be documented in the project charter. In some organizations, the project charter may actually be a project plan. What to expect, or what is the solution for the project. Again, we are stating in that charter document what will be delivered at the end, and if it was service, how are you going to perform that service, or if it was a product, how are you going to achieve that product. If you are stating these activities on how are you going to achieve the goal of producing or developing such a product or such a service at the end, then that can be considered as a plan. This is what we plan to do to achieve that goal or these objectives. If the charter document does not have enough details, then in the planning process it will require more details such as schedules, work breakdown structure, and complete risk assessment, which is normally developed later on in the project. The project charter just makes the project manager's role legit. It makes the project legit, the whole project legit, and it sets the target for the project. The last activity in the initiation process will be to identify and document the high-level risks, assumptions, and constraints using historical data and expert judgment. The risk, it includes a quick assessment of the significance of each risk, the probability and effect, and how to address them. It's important to note that this initial risk assessment does not have enough details to replace the full risk assessment that will be carried or be conducted during the planning phase. So this is not enough. This is considered as a high-level risk analysis that will look at the risk from organizational point of view or high-level point of view, and not go in details with the specifics and different issues and how to address them. In the risk management or dealing with risk, we first identify the risk, then we assess the risk, the mitigation of the risk, and monitoring and controlling. So we ask some questions to get this information. We say what are the risks that's associated with the project, and what's the probability of loss that result from these risks, and how much are the losses likely to cost. What might the losses be if the worst scenario happen? What are the alternatives to solve such a risk or to address such a risk, and how can the losses be reduced or eliminated as much as possible, and will the alternatives produce other risk? So we go to risk identification and we start looking at the different areas. Either will be technical risk or project management risk, organizational risk, or external risk. So we have to look at the different areas, and based on that we identify the risk in these different areas. Then we go to the assessment and look at the probability of the loss that results from this risk. How much are the losses likely to cost, and what might the losses be if the worst case scenario happen. Then when looking at the mitigation, we look at the alternatives. How can the losses be reduced or eliminated, whether to accept, avoid, contingency planning, mitigate, and transfer. And then will the alternative produce any of the alternatives will produce other risks. During the identification, the assessment, and the mitigation, we need to monitor and control and keep documents of the risks. So we'll have something called risk log, where we look at the risk that we identified at a certain stage, the mitigation that was done, or the alternative, did we implement it? When we implemented, did we have any other risks related or a new risk that just came as a result of mitigating the first risk? All these in a log, and we will know exactly if it was addressed, solved, what was the loss, did we reduce, eliminate the loss, and so on. So we have all these steps documented, and can be used either for this project as a reporting method for the management, or can be used as historical data for future projects on how to mitigate such risks. For the assumptions, we are looking at all the factors that are involved for the planning purposes, considered to be true, real, or certain, but without proof. We don't have a proof for that, so we are assuming that this should be this way, or this should happen. During the planning process, these assumptions will be validated to make sure that what we assumed is correct. If any assumptions are inaccurate or inconsistent or incomplete, they will create project risk and may adversely affect project scope, timeline, and cost. At that point, the assumption will be moved from this area to the risk area. Alternatives will be suggested to address it, and again we can start the implementation to reduce or eliminate and create a log file for the new risk that was generated because of the assumption. For the constraints are restrictions that limit or place conditions on the project, especially those associated with the project scope, such as the hard deadline, a predetermined budget, set milestone, contract provisions, or privacy or security considerations. All these are considered constraints or restrictions. Those constraints and constrictions can be because of the organization, as conditions of or constraints from the client, the sponsor, the management, the upper management. We have different sources of these constraints or boundaries. It can come also from external factors such as social, environmental, political, or economical and technological issues or limitations. And again, it can come from limitation in the organization itself, where we have maybe limited facility, space, resources, legal requirements, and other factors. In order to identify the different constraints, it's necessary to analyze the project environment and stakeholders like we did before, and based on that we can identify the constraints that came as a result from stakeholders, and other that came due to the environment, the social environment, the economical, or other involved factors.